posted time having arrived and a quorum of members present, I'll call the Public Health and Safety Committee meeting for Monday, April 21st, 2025 to order. The first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes for our last three sessions, 2/7, 3/17, and 3/27 of 2025, copies of which were in the packets. Did anyone note any adjustments or corrections that they needed for the minutes? If not, I'll take a motion to approve them. Motion by Watson, is there a second? Second by Lukens. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, so the minutes are all approved. Item number 2 is to consider approval or denial of various license applications. You have those in your packet. Notable is that we had held up on a couple from last month to give the chief time to review evidence of rehabilitation. I think we all received his note that said he was satisfied with the documentation that both parties had submitted. So this month they are recommended for approval, Kristen Vollmer and Tisha Payton, that we had waited on last month. So if we take our standard motion, they would be in the approval column this time versus denial. Also, you'll notice there's a few picnic license, a few events, none of which are particularly new. Also in the batch is approval recommendations for a Class C wine license for Taste of Jamaica, pending recommendation for a dance hall license for West Sider Diner and Lounge. They're renovating an adjacent space next door. And a sidewalk cafe with alcohol also for West Sider. The owner of West Sider, Tyler Volge, is with us today. If you have questions for him about either operation at West Sider, or Tyler, did you have anything you wanted to outline for us about the new offerings at West Sider?
Well, there's a adjacent address at 626. That's on the same foundation, same building, shares the same mechanicals and the same electrical. There's a partition between it, similar to the way that Malarkeys and counties used to be set up, or maybe how Lotnau's and their additional space is set up.
Yep.
So I asked just how to amend my premise to include this other space. We used the precedent set at for Lotnau's, they have a dance hall, I guess, because it's a rentable space.
Yep.
This would only be open if it's being rented, or we're putting, it's not gonna be open every day. So they suggested that's the license that I should.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I sort of redrew the premise to include the storage and everything that the state requires, so.
Yep.
I think we all.
And sidewalk seating and that for summer, so.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yep, so excellent. Anyone have questions about that at all? If not, we can take the standard motion to accept or deny licenses as recommended by staff. If someone would want to make that motion.
I'll make the motion.
Motion from Larson, is there a second? Second from Lukens. Discussion on any of the items? If not, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, so that motion carries. And those are either accepted or denied as recommended, including the two that we brought forward again from last time. Then we have item number 3, discussion and possible action regarding a letter of concern for abandonment of premises at Jalapenos of Wausau at 300 North 3rd Street, lower level, Suite 1, here in Wausau. We had some discussion at our last meeting about the fact that for an extended period now, Jalapenos has been closed. Obviously, they're in possession of a Class B beer and liquor license, and they've not been able to get open and stay open to comply with the requirements of that license. So we had asked the clerks to make contact with the owner. And so Caitlin, do you have an update?
Yes, an update as of this afternoon.
I love a good update.
The Jalapenos did conditionally surrender their license for a potential new leasee of Los Compadres Mexican restaurant to take over that facility. So met with her and Mark Craig this afternoon, and it looks like they're looking to open in June. So we already have the plan of operation, and we're finishing up with the required documents. Hopefully, have a liquor license subcommittee before the May Public Health and Safety.
Perfect. Because that saves us the steps of then trying to reclaim the license, which is a way bigger process, and then also eliminates the cool down period. So. Good news there. Let's see. And Mark is here today. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Mark, about the space? Or she took care of it?
They did sign and we were happy.
So what she said?
Everything.
Perfect. All right, so we'll then accept that update. We won't need to take action then on item 3 under the circumstances with that conditional surrender. That's the easiest way to get where they're trying to go. Item number 4 is discussion and possible action on granting a request for a 90-day extension to be open for business for good cause for Days Bola Dome. The owner and petitioner was Dean Day. Premises located at 1715 Stewart Avenue. You'll recall a few months ago, Days had a fire. They've been closed since because they're under restoration. And so they haven't been able to be open. And while that renovation is in progress, they've remained closed, but certainly sensible that that's the situation.
I'll make a motion to approve.
To approve the extension, okay? And a second, okay, so a motion from Larson and a second from Watson to approve the extension while they're under repair. Any questions on that at all?
I guess any shortage, anything else would be this service to the community.
Right, they have a
It's a true icon.
legitimate problem that's causing the delay, so that makes total sense that we would accommodate them. So with a motion and a second on the floor to grant the extension, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. So that extension will be given to them and they can continue their repairs. Item number 5 is discussion and possible action on approving amendments to the special event policy and application implementing the $1 public safety fee. You'll recall that during our budget process, this item came up and we had approved that for the 2025 budget. One thing that I had discussed with event organizers and even some citizens seemed surprised that the way the policy was initially written, even if an event did not occur, we would still collect the fee. And so in talking with our staff on that, they've drafted an amendment to this that would waive that fee if the event is canceled or doesn't take place or if no services are provided to the event. And I think that clarifies a little bit more for organizers. They're not going to have to come up with that payment if their event doesn't happen and if our people don't need to be there. Sarah?
So I just had a question because I was reading through it and it says it's self-reported. Is there a way, right? Fees are going to be like entered by the person that does it. Like, is there oversight to that, or it's just sort of on an audit basis?
Well, I mean, I think some of the oversight associated with that is these are events that we're at, and if they report 200 tickets and there's 10,000 people there, we'll have to have a conversation with them. But in reality, aside from assigning staff that are actively involved in the sale of the tickets, I can't come up with a way to address that. I think when I look at this amendment and the conversation that I recall being part of when we were looking at this, if there's no income coming into them, we wouldn't want them to pay us $1 for something that didn't happen. However, something to be considered is if you sell tickets and then cancel the event and you're not refunding, people are charging $1 on behalf of the city, and then to not expect those funds to come to the city, that just might be a consideration. Is it a case of if your event gets canceled and you've refunded the cost, then that would make sense to me that we wouldn't want that. But if an organizer is charging $1 on behalf of the city as a surcharge and then doesn't refund those tickets if their event is canceled, do we allow that organization to keep the $1 that they charged on behalf of the city?
We had looked at, well, at least in the conversation I've had with some event folks was, if they're selling non-refundable tickets and it's disclosed on the front end of the purchase that they're non-refundable tickets, I think it depends on how the organizer is not all organizers are gonna up their ticket price by $1. Some may just give $1 of the revenue generated from the original ticket price towards the fee. So whether they raise the ticket price or take a cut in revenue is really up to the organizer for how they handle it. There's no way we're going to control that. But, the comment that I received either from citizens and from one event person was that if it really is a fee for service, then a service has to be provided to collect the fee, because if you don't, it's a cash grab. And that made total sense to me as a consumer, that if there is no event and we're not there and we don't put in staff hours and we don't utilize equipment and staff time, then we aren't entitled to the $1 either. And so, that was where I started the conversation with our staff about, if an event doesn't take place, where do we land on that $1? And so the amendment we have in front of us would waive that fee for events that don't take place or events that don't utilize any services. So that's just where we got to today. So, and I think that discussion started really after our last meeting when we were looking at event security equipment. And we were talking about a CIP request for event security equipment, specifically for vehicular barriers for parades. And one of the revenue sources that got discussed, other than CIP and borrowing, was that maybe this fund, an equipment fund or whatever, would be established to provide for that. And so that did create some consternation from the public about whether it is really a service fee or is it an equipment fund. And so that kind of is where the discussion started to take off the day after our last meeting is, well, what is the fee really? And, really, if it's a fee for service, I feel like we should, in all fairness, provide the service if we want the money. And if they don't call on us and we don't have to go and no one's there, it seems fair that we would not charge people. So, Becky.
Here's where I worry that if this is, let's say there's a rain out, I'm trying to think of when that would happen, but let's say they sell tickets ahead of time, there's a rain out, be it at that Wings or Wausau or whatever they call it. We are going, if we're not getting that dollar and it's non-refundable, be very clear that what is happening, because we will be accused of taking that dollar.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're not getting that dollar, we need to make it very clear that if it's canceled and there's no fire department or police services there, that we're not getting that dollar and they can go back after the organizers of that event.
Right.
Because that is my fear, is that it's going to be all over that, this is a money grab by the city.
Mm-hmm. It was kind of characterized as that when we first brought it up, but then understanding the amount of staff overtime that goes into managing events. And the number one argument was that the entire region enjoys the event and enjoys the venue, but only Wausau taxpayers pay the bill. And so I could understand in fairness that we wanted to implement a fee, but I think the way we implement the fee, I think the communication surrounding cancellation has to be clear.
Yeah.
If they're gonna do that. But Chief.
Just a couple of thoughts. I'm fine with that. This year's an experimental year because how many $1 are we going to collect? We have no idea. I know that the expense in having special events over the next decade is probably going to tip $1 million when we think about equipment and what we need in order to be professionally staffed with the appropriate equipment. So I know we're not set up for that right now. This is my fault. I'm certain the word's left my mouth. We have to find a way to buy the appropriate equipment so that Wausau can still be the hub of special events. Mm-hmm. If the way to do that, and what we find is there's surplus dollars beyond the cost of police and fire services at these special events, if those dollars can be earmarked in a fund that rolls from year to year as a savings account to be able to make those big purchases, as a police chief, I don't care where the dollars come from. I know that if we're going to have these events, I want them to be safe. I want it to be professional. I want us to meet the standards that are being set throughout the state. In order to do that, we're going to need to find a big pile of money or multiple big piles of money as years roll on to have that equipment. So if there is a surplus, and I'm guessing that there would be, I think we were conservative in what we anticipated, that might be a conversation for the future to look at whether those dollars, and then we just be transparent on, we're using dollars and revenues raised from special events and our fee in order to fund the necessary equipment and staffing to put those special events in.
If that's where we land, I think so. I think also one thing I'd ask for is that at the end of this event season, when we get to the fall, that we reconvene and take stock of how this effort went with this first season. And then report those results out also to the finance committee from a revenue standpoint. They're also going to be interested in the impact that this actually made. Some large event organizers are able to obtain event cancellation insurance, which reimburses them for a bunch of their costs if their event can't take place, which like last year that air show was rained out essentially. I mean, they did get some events in, but devastated in terms of attendance for what it could have been. But a lot of smaller event organizers that still charge for tickets may not be able to purchase that. And so I think that's something we have to be sensitive to. And so I feel like the draft that we have here makes sense. I mean, at least to make this fair for the first year that we're trying it.
To be clear though, since we're using the Wings Over Wausau event that got rained out last year, the city had a whole ton of staff that were there, prepared to work, that were being paid. So even though they were canceled and they didn't have the revenues, we still had the expense associated with that. So
Right. And that's where the event cancellation insurance, I think, comes into play where, it essentially revenue-wise saves them if that event turns out to be a fraction of what it really should have been. So,
Is there any, I forgot, is there timeframes about cancellation? Like, is it canceled like before, a week ahead, a month?
Currently, no.
Because I mean, in that case, resources were expended.
right. So, so at that point, so the draft you have in front of you would at least clarify that. It's the same policy we approved for this year, with that exception, surrounding events that don't happen or services that don't get provided. Now, in that case, services were provided, but if they're not and they're not needed, this would at least add a fairness element to that. If, I guess, how are you guys feeling about that? Someone would need to make a motion if you wanted to adopt this.
So I just have a question.
Sure.
Question. Is there a way to like reword it so that if after the event it is determined that no service was needed or the event was canceled, I mean, then the service should still be paid for, right?
Right. So I agree with you. I read that at the same time. I think it should be if the event was canceled and services
And
were
no
not.
service was
Right,
provided?
not or.
Not or, if and, okay. Well, and Ann's here, she drafted it, so she can make that, change before council, right? Before we get to council, if we approve
Yes.
it with that amendment,
Yes.
amend it to clarify or to and.
Mhm.
Then we know that there's no expense on our part before we would waive anything.
There was a cancellation clause already in the special event application on page 6 of 15. It says cancellation of any event for any reason shall result in charges for actual services provided, forfeiture of permit fees, and any other forfeiture related to facility or equipment rentals. We could put the clause in there otherwise, or we could strike out the other one and modify this one. If you would
That would make sense too, because then it's all in one place. When people go to look for it, it doesn't appear more than once. Cancellation as a topic would appear one time. If we could place it in that area as well. Okay. All right, so with those two clarifications, does someone want to move to approve this policy as adjusted on the committee floor? I'll take a motion from Watson. Is there a second? Second from McElhaney. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, so that's approved, and then our revised version is what will go to council then for us with those changes. Item number 6 is discussion and possible action amending Wausau Municipal Code Section 9.20.050, personal conduct and nuisance, and creating Wausau Municipal Code Section 9.20.055, intoxicants in public parks. I think, and I'm not sure, but I read a news story about this upcoming meeting and this item today, and it seemed like they weren't quite understanding what the intent of this was. This is an enabling ordinance to allow our park department to host pop-up beer gardens at their facilities, either as separate events or in connection with other events. Park director is here. So Jamie, I guess, did you want to just walk us through a little bit like what your vision for the pop-up stuff would be?
Sure. So this was a request actually of the Parks Committee members, or one in particular, and then we brought it to the Parks Committee, and they supported the idea of potentially doing these pop-up or just a permanent beer garden in a specific facility. It's kind of a, let's try it out and see what works, and if it does, other counties around the state and cities around the state do this. It's a revenue generator for them. Per the state statute, which I believe is in that resolution that our city attorney put together, it does allow for cities and counties to allow their parks department to sell beer, there's specific malt beverages within the city and county parks, but it has to be passed through a resolution or an ordinance, or however the municipality feels is the best course of action. So we're suggesting an ordinance revision here. We're going to do the same thing at the county because we could be in a city park, we could be in Marathon Park. We haven't really decided. We don't have anything specifically planned at this point. We need to get through this first, and then we were going to put together a plan, maybe 1 or 2 this year to try it out. We model it after what Milwaukee County does. They have a very robust beer gardens. They have a traveling one that goes to different parks, and then they also have permanent ones in 5 different parks. So we would look at what might be the best course of action for this, but it would be allowing our staff to be the sellers of it versus the vendor.
Well, and in that case, your staff then are also the servers, is that
The
correct?
servers,
So
yeah.
then you wouldn't have individual picnic licenses, and you wouldn't have volunteer server licenses like what you see happening at the fair. And that this really kind of came up with, the first time I heard about a beer garden concept like this operated by the park department was in the original visioning sessions for the riverfront. There was a notion at one point that somewhere in the vicinity of the Bridge Street Bridge, they wanted some type of either pop-up or permanent facility. At that time, though, we were still in the process of, making some policy changes to allow for some of these things. I mean, we still had a robust fence ordinance. We had all kinds of things where we didn't feel that we had the appropriate controls to allow it at that time when the whole concept of that riverfront was new. But that said, then knowing that other municipalities have had some success in doing this to showcase a particular park or venue, or to, ride along with another event that's in the vicinity that, would add value or add some type of character to an event. So we talked about it in the Park and Rec Committee, and as long as we could get the licensing figured out so that we were legal in what we were doing, and so that the one thing I talked about there was that it's delineated in terms of its boundaries so people know when they are and are not in the right place, because we can't have people walk off with cups and containers. And so as long as we have the right controls, the Park and Rec Committee was supported and then sent it here for us to sort out on the licensing side. I think what I would recommend is that if we try this, that we reconvene in a year and make sure it works and take stock of what challenges it presented and what success we had with it. I don't know that we need to sunset it, but I do think we need to take stock of the effort to see if we need adjustments or if we want to continue with it, because it's so new. I mean, it's untested right now. So what do you guys think? Go ahead.
I'm not for this at all. We have enough alcohol problems in this city. And I just see this as not going against our, how many, we did the 4 p.m. alcohol ban on the 400 block. It moved to another park, and we're talking about all this alcohol issue, and now we're going to have city staff sell beer at parks. I don't understand how that computes with our issues and how we have dealt with them in the past.
I don't know. I guess, do you have thoughts on that, Chief? Because I see it as somewhat 2 different things. Only because if you have the beer garden and you have the appropriate controls in place, you really are in kind of an event realm there. The issues that we've been trying to manage with public intoxication and excessive consumption outside of events in public spaces really has been a different set of problems to solve. I mean, it's just, I don't know. What are your thoughts, Chief?
Wow, that's a lose-lose one, ask
It-
the
it
chief.
kind
But,
of like-
but I would say this, I don't doubt that Jamie and her staff can appropriately sell beer at a beer garden, and that the appropriate age individuals, and they still have control over that. And that's juxtaposed to, I think, the point Becky's making, which is, Matt, one of the 2 major things you're dealing with right now and trying to come up with solutions, mental health and addiction issues, alcohol being a significant one. So it's not lost on me that I live in Wisconsin and we have a culture that is, there's alcohol served at
Everywhere.
all these different events, and moving to Wausau when I was a freshman in high school to learn that one of the ways churches raise money is they put up a beer garden and sell beer. So I think from a policy standpoint, I think we can do it safely, but as the chief of police, do I feel like we need more places to sell beer? Probably.
I want
wanted to note that we can't create an ordinance for the county, so like
No,
Jamie said,
right.
the county will do their own, but ours just says the city staff and officials are permitted to sell it in city parks, and they'll
Right.
do a mirrored one at the county level, and then we think the ability for your staff to serve in city parks would be covered by our contract for services. with
I
the
think
county.
so, right,
But
and then.
this is what the ordinance had.
Right, so this would give them the city facilities, which really addresses the riverfront, Oak Island, you know, a lot of popular areas where we already have probably the space to host such an event. If they wanted Marathon Park, that's where the county ordinance would have to come in, matching wording or whatever. You know, and that's not even to say they may do something out at 9 Mile or whatever, like you don't know in connection with an event. You know, I mean, we've had times where the organizers of the Wausau Marathon have requested a beer garden at Marathon Park. And that was the last event I would expect to see one at, and they asked for one, and it went fine. I mean, their own people did the serving, but, you know, I think that, you know, if someone had asked me 10 years ago if I would have thought then at the time with the policies we had in place, that we could have managed such a thing safely and that the optics of it would not be ironic for the problems that we had then in terms of, you know, licensing and operations, I would have voted no on it back then. I think we've made enough positive changes that we could manage it, like the chief said, safely, and yet still be able to address the issues that we have in the community that are somewhat unrelated to events. But, you know, whether that looks, I don't know what the optics of that look like. I guess, Jamie, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, the idea of it and the way that other communities do it it could be two ways. One, coupled with an event, like was mentioned, where it's an additional fundraiser. So Bayfield County and Ashland, the city of Ashland do that with some of the events they have in their public space, kind of like our 400 block. So it's a fundraising thing. But if we were to do the pop-up, it would more be like once a month, or maybe depending on how successful it is, I guess, but it would be to showcase different parks along with family events. We have staff there to do, you know, things with families. And it would be from 4 to 8 or from 4 to 9 or 5 to 8, 5 to 9. Like, it would be a very limited number of hours. So it wouldn't be that we would be open, you know, all day long or at, you know, into bar time or anything like that. It would be a very set time frame meant to be more of a community connection gathering place. And that's how Milwaukee kind of engages their neighborhoods, just to get people out in the park, so that it actually has made some of the Milwaukee parks more safer, just because it gets more people into the park, so it's less people that are doing things there. So it's meant to just kind of be a neighborhood gathering spot activity, so it wouldn't just be we put beer out and people just drink. We would couple it with, you know, activities that are going around.
I'm assuming you'd wristband the attendees once they're ID checked so that nobody gets served by accident?
Yeah, we would have to come up with what our protocols would definitely be, and then we would have any of our staff that are doing it go through that server's
Responsible
class.
server training.
Yeah, and we could work, so we still have to plan that out, what that might look like and where we would want it, and I probably would work with, you know, the chief of police or the Wausau PD to just let them know what we're planning and see if we're missing anything.
I think at the very least, you absolutely have to have the server training so they can recognize what overconsumption looks like. If we demand that of our bartenders, we absolutely have to make sure our people have it too. I think they also have to be mindful of the sober server ordinance. They can't consume while they're serving. I think that we need that policy in place. And the other thing I think really makes some sense is, where was I going with that? Responsible server, but then, I lost my train of thought, but, wristbanding. We've asked, and in some cases with certain events of certain size, we've required that events wristband their attendees. And that really has worked out well, because I think that if you're checking the IDs on the front end and you have folks wristbanded, the likelihood that you would serve someone underage by accident is, you know, and not to say that those beer gardens can't also be the subject of compliance checks, you know, just like the fair is and events are. So I do think that if we want to try this, that we maybe try it this season, that at our October meeting, that we would put it back on the agenda to take stock of how it went before we would just throw the gate open and keep it year after year. So, Carol.
I understand what you're saying, Becky, because I know I in past years I've struggled with that, with like church picnics and things like that too. And I also, have heard from residents, when there was the limit put on, in terms of, or whatever, or anyway, or not having alcohol in parks. I've heard from residents with that too. So it's a tough, for me, it's a tough one because, it's a tough one. But the county, I'm guessing, would be okay with it. Do you have any idea?
Well, we're gonna take the same ordinance discussion to Park Commission on Tuesday, next Tuesday.
I'd be interested to see what they say. I mean, they have a fair.
They have a fair, and yes.
It's not, it's staff even. I mean, what is, I can't wrap my head around that we have city staff that's going to be selling alcohol.
Park department staff, but I think that was to control the training and, because with other events, say you take the fair organizations, when you have volunteer servers, that training element is not near as robust.
Well, this comes out of the state statute. The state statute specifically says that a city, it doesn't have to be the Parks Department, but that the city can pass an ordinance or resolution allowing city staff to provide and sell the alcohol or the malted beverage in your public spaces. So it just happens to be that this was requested of our department through Parks Committee members, but it could be any department that's coming forward. So it's the state statute that this is going by. If you wanted to have and try beer gardens and not pass this, then you could hire people to do it, and then they have to follow the same ordinance you already have in place. So the picnic license requirements, all of that stuff, it just makes it, there's different restrictions to that. And then the revenue, the idea that reason why other municipalities do this and use the state statute for this is a revenue source. So.
Well, and that's part of the discussion we had in Park Committee was the idea of contracting this out where you have already licensed vendors come in and showcase their facility or their product or whatever, and in context with this beer garden. That's where you come into the need where I think you would need picnic licenses. It affects their premises licensing. Their servers, are licensed for their premise. They're not licensed to travel all over. We didn't want volunteer servers like we see at other events because that also, the training wasn't there. So, I mean, we agreed to take the item here to figure out what the licensing would look like to let them try it for a season. But, it certainly doesn't mean that it's a permanent item. I mean, if you guys are interested in a trial. If we're not interested in a trial, then it doesn't happen. So that's how we got here. Park Committee, I think, maybe passed it unanimously to send it here for us to.
I'd be willing to give it a try for a year. I can understand Becky's point, and I can, just like anything in life, there's pros and cons, and if you don't stick your neck out, you don't gain anything, or lose anything.
Well, then we may find that it's more or less popular than we know too. It's never been tried here before. That's the thing,
I was gonna say with like, especially if there's an event with like food trucks or something like that too, I could see, and if it's a few hours, like that's where, it could generate revenue, people could like it.
I'm not supporting at all. I don't see that city staff or city should make money on selling alcohol. That's the bottom line. It just is a bad look, in my personal opinion. We're trying to, I don't know, man. We've had nothing but problems, and now we're saying, we talk about the alcohol culture. We've had, how much do you think police will be needed down there if you're going to be serving alcohol? I mean, we know events that have alcohol require more police presence. So why would the city try to be a revenue thing on selling alcohol? It just isn't something, I'm going to support at this point. I don't think I don't think we should be in the business of selling alcohol for a profit.
Well, the one group we've not heard from throughout this conversation was people who do it for a living, and that was tavern owners and servers, licensed servers. We've not heard from any of them. When we first talked about food trucks, the first people that were upset about food trucks were brick and mortar restaurants that paid for the overhead to run a restaurant. And, then we're, seeing that mobile approach perhaps detract from their sales. So we have not heard, I don't believe, nor have we yet asked for any feedback from tavern owners.
Well, that was part of our direction from the Parks Committee.
Okay.
Was to reach out to some of the local breweries and some of the local establishments. We haven't reached out to all of them to see if they would be supportive or even partner with us. And so we have heard back from a few of them, like Salmalot of Merrill is very interested in supporting. The new owners of Bull Falls were very interested, but they're just getting off their feet. So we have, they want to partner with us, but we haven't gone any further.
Right. I think the one thing we have to be mindful of is where these locations are as well and where this stuff happens, because the last thing we want to do is set up shop like across the street from someone who makes their living doing that. I mean, we have one tavern owner in the room, and it's Matt Brewer from Matt's 101 Pub. And so I hate to put him on the spot, but what is your feeling about something like that?
So,
Do you feel it's
number one, I love a renewable financial resource for the city, right? Anything that we can do to bring money into the city and supply activities for our community is great. I think number one, it can be well controlled and managed if you've got great rules and you manage the situation. So that's for me as a community member. Me as a bar owner, things are getting rough for little bars in town, and it's harder and harder to fill our bars. And every time there's another church or another city event that takes people away from our bars, I think if you'll recall, you approved a large patio at my bar a couple of years ago that was spent $120,000 on. And so to fill that patio outside with customers, well, if they're going to every church event and every other outside event, it's very difficult to do that. So I think to say a hard no on anything that brings the city along is difficult for me to ever say. But for me to say yes, is there an opportunity to partner? Is there a way to make it financially viable for all of us so we all get to participate and we all have to follow the same rules on some level? I realize it'd be a little different for the city with some of the scenarios, which I completely understand. That said, is finding a way to partner so that we can all participate, have it be events or other things that we have the same right or ability to put up a tent and do something and have the same opportunity. That would be great. I think you'd find a lot of people that would be interested in participating in that. I'm also a board of director member for the Tavern League in Marathon County. I'd happily take it back to the board and ask if it get some other feedback for you guys, if that would be interesting for you all, or somebody else can speak for bars here in town.
I think that it's relevant information to have. I mean, whether or not we do it, I think that, obviously their opinion matters. The one thing that I know we had trouble with even during COVID when we had to modify, like just to let people operate outside out their front door to like spread people out and whatever.
We've felt this with before, so thank you very much.
Right? So yes, I was fully expecting you to say, don't bring your beer garden to Elm Street. But, right, but, no, we had to modify the premises during COVID even to allow people to spill out into the front yard, into the street, into the side yard, so that people could be spaced out. And so I think for licensed establishments that hold Class B licenses to like pick up and put up a tent somewhere, I think that maybe violates the conditions of the Class B. Like the premises has to be contiguous and like adjacent to the address where the license is for. So I think that the idea of participating in a pop-up with a tent maybe wouldn't work under Chapter 125, but that's something that we would have to like determine, maybe even as a separate conversation. But, where we go with this trial, I think the initial concept was brought up as a trial for this summer season, like the 2025 summer season, and then see what that brings, and, what successes or challenges it presents before we decide if we're going to keep it or continue it.
I mean, would it be a little easier to wrap your mind around if we did sunset it out at the end of the season, or does it take a lot to do?
No, because if you sunset it, then you just have to take action to make it permanent if you want to keep it. If you don't sunset it and you decide you don't like it, you just repeal it. So we vote either way. It's just a matter of how Ann writes it up. So
Why would this stop, this wouldn't stop the county? I mean, if they want to
It wouldn't,
sell
but
it.
that
at
only
Marathon
gives
Park.
a Marathon Park. So,
I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around kids at a park and we're selling alcohol as a city. I just am having a really hard time with that. I really do. I mean, and we're doing it because it's a revenue booster. I mean,
it's certainly new. I mean, it's definitely a new concept. It's not something that we've dabbled in before. So, I could go either way on whether or not we should be, but we've also asked for creative solutions. Both from an expense and a revenue standpoint, and ideas like this keep coming up, so, but it's probably been 10 years since the first person that brought up the idea of a park department beer garden, at least in meetings that I was in, was, the finance director had seen them down in Milwaukee. And the former parks director had also seen them in other areas run by other park departments. And so, they started to kind of create the shell of an idea in the mid-2010s, but it went nowhere because, first trying to figure out who was going to run it and whether or not we had the right controls in place to run it, it just never got any legs. So, Lou.
I can, as I said earlier, I can appreciate all sides of this, but I mean, since we're here, I'm gonna make the motion to move forward with this and for a year and try and bring it back in October and see
Okay.
if it's worth
October.
pursuing.
2025.
Did you want a sunset date on it for 31, and then we can,
How about what? How about a sunset date of November 1st?
okay,
I think that.
because then it's not permanent unless we come back and make it permanent. That does give it some,
There's
little
November
firmer
1st,
temporary
you're not
nature.
gonna be outside after November 1st anyway.
right, and that's the close date that we used for all the special stuff we did during COVID too, was always November 1st, so. Okay, so we have a motion to accept this trial with a sunset date of 11/1/25, at which time we will take stock of how it went and decide if we want to let it drop or continue. Is there a second?
If there's a second, can we see?
Sure. We can continue discussion, but is there a second to Lou's motion to get it on the floor?
Okay, well, I'll second it because there's something else I want to say.
Okay, so we have a motion from Larson, second from Lucas. Go ahead, Carol.
So, I think the one thing that's really hitting me too, from what, Becky said is teens, adolescents, and, I appreciate what you're saying, because I work with a lot that, that deal with tough stuff. And I guess the one thing, that, like, I know, I do believe that there would be a lot of people that would really like this. This is hard for me again because I have to make a decision here, but, I hear from teens all the time, there's nothing for us to do, and I think that has happened, that has been the case for a long time, but what's hitting me, what's hard for me right now is, okay, so we'll do this, and I understand that it would bring in revenue, but they're like, there's nothing for us to do that doesn't cost money, like WOW costs money, like a lot of them can't afford it. And they're always asking for like, we wish there were more things for us to do here that doesn't cost money. So that's my struggle somewhat is, I realize this would be different than that because it would be raising revenue. But at the same time, I guess I'm thinking, I guess this wouldn't be necessarily an investment for us. This isn't an investment. But in some ways, like what Becky's saying, what message does it send? Like, what is our importance, so people can spend their money on it, but then what's been invested in the kids? If that makes
That
sense.
whole, like, where
I
it
don't
goes.
think I'm articulating.
Or are you heading towards an earmark on the funding for youth activities?
No,
Okay,
not that. I'm just, it would be, but then, right, what does, we're raising, yeah. Because I know that,
I mean, the optics of
Students go
raising money
home
that
and
way for it
deal
is
with-
also controversial. So-
right, no, not that, just that I'm struggling, I guess, I'm feeling what Becky's saying. So anyway,
The only reason I had any interest in it in the park committee was because it's temporary in nature, and it's a trial and it's untested, but, if it was a, permanent, recurring situation, I don't know that I would have supported it in the park committee either. The trial period was where I was able to live with it. Any other discussion? If not, we'll vote and see where we come out. All right, with the motion and a second on the floor, having added a sunset date of November 1st, 2025. Members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
No.
Okay, we'll record 2 noes and 3 yeses. So that'll go to council on a mixed recommendation, and then they'll get their kick at the cat, the 29th, right? So, which then, if they approve it, it'll be in place for this summer event season, but not past that. So, 3-2, motion passes 3-2. Item number 7 is the Wausau Fire Department first quarter report. We have the report in our packets. Anything notable on the report that you wanted to discuss with us, Deputy Chief, please?
Nothing in particular other than it's the first quarter's been a busy quarter.
Looks like it.
One thing that I'd like to highlight is we had 2 graduating academies this first quarter for our new hires and our apprentice. So we have all 6 apprentices now online. They're working their shift, and they're also attending pre-med school.
Nice.
Yeah.
I saw a post about them completing on your Facebook page, so very exciting. Glad to see that take off and see if that helps us with our staffing situation, so. Any questions for the Deputy Chief on the fire report? If not, we'll place that report on file. And then item number 7 is the Police Department first quarter operations report. Anything on that report, Chief, that you wanted to point out?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably an appropriate time during this meeting to talk about what our plans are with ARPA dollars and partnering with the county to serve the house. So I would leave it up to you, Chair. Do you want that during the community outreach portion, or do you want me to cover that here?
Let's take it during the outreach portion because it's almost related. Try to keep all the items for that kind of like clustered together, especially for people who expect them at that time in case they don't tune in until then. Anything on the report that you guys have questions for that you want to talk with the chief about? If not, we've placed that report on file as well. Both reports were published in the packet so the public can see them. Item 9 is the tavern activities report for the month of March. Anybody have questions on that? Anything they noticed on that report? Look like a typical month. And we'll place that report on file as well.
I mean, just
Sure, for sure, yes.
A couple of things that you might hear. I know there's tavern represented in the room, so one of the direction that, well, honestly, it all lands on me, but this is Captain Paul's talk to our patrol staff and said, hey, let's get back on doing routine tavern inspections where we go in and check their licensing and the licensing of the bartenders. And so that has been occurring over the last month or so. And then additionally, the Marathon County Health Department has stewardship over our bar checks where they get an underage 20-year-old individual and go into the taverns and they check compliance for serving. And so that has occurred. There were some violations that'll probably show up on the next one. But that those things are occurring. It's never a stump to chump. So hopefully Tavern League can say, hey, pay attention. They're doing those things. So I just wanted the committee to understand those checks are occurring.
And last month we had talked about the demerit points that we observed that were awarded to Matt's 101 pub after that weapon situation that happened in February. I see in the report you had removed those, or the department has removed those points since they were cooperative with the investigation.
Yeah, my assumption is you got a letter on that from us.
We did.
Yeah.
That's actually some of what I can.
So, so that's good because I mean that type of cooperation is what we want to see, and certainly don't want you to be penalized for it. Any other questions on the tavern report? With that, before the meeting started, I was talking with Matt Brewer about tavern issues in general, and he brought us an idea that I think is appropriate to take with the tavern report because it's really a collaborative situation. I guess if you wanted to run down a little bit, Matt, your idea and see if there's a way that we can maybe work that in offline and research.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry,
So,
you'd stand right over there, the camera would be able to pick you up. Just his voice.
so for those of you who may not know me, Matt Brewer, Matt's 101 Pub. Number one, huge thank you really quickly. We did have an unfortunate event at the 101 Pub. I've been there almost 5 years. We really felt like we cleaned that bar up. We've had no points assessed or violations since. We did have this scenario that, interestingly, it sort of brought out some unsung heroes in the group, and that, we had people step aside or step in to help out with this person that was injured at our bar, which I really appreciate people willing to get involved in a scary situation. But huge thank you to Fire EMS for showing up and taking care of my people, our victim that was there, the police department for doing such a great job with us, even treating us somewhat as a victim in that, we're trying to run a business and do something and pay our mortgages with this place. That said, Detective Zimmerman was amazing. He walked me through the whole process. He was great to me and my staff. And so huge thank you to everybody that supported us through all that. And we got our letter. And number one, just thank you so much for all that. And we'll always participate. We've always tried to. So we'll keep that going as well. Reason why I'm actually here is based on a number of those things is really, so I've been a nurse and a paramedic for 20-some years, and safety is huge for my team, and representing Tavern as well. How do we collaborate together to create some version of safety training for new bar owners, new bartenders, some version of just bringing this together? So, I can do so much. I was a bartender for years through college and through grad school, and I was fortunate to be able to have great teachers. I can only be at my bar so much, and I'll tell you, if you meet with any bartender, they have mixed ability to manage our clientele, look for early signs. We do have some education for, safe serve and whatnot, but I will tell you, I think it comes short on just some of the basic needs for a bartender to keep a bar safe and their patrons safe. So what I'd really love to do is partner somehow, myself involved, to work with the police department to talk about what that could look like. I don't have any exact recommendations or what that has to be, but we can't go wrong partnering with our city council and our police department fire to see what that could look like. Tavern League would like to be involved in that as well. So are there costs or other things associated? Obviously, we don't want to have any regulation around it necessarily, but is there something available to people, or is there something we do even if we reach out and we start the cause? But really, that's really why I came down today, is to reach out, ask if there's somebody I can speak with, where we can sit down and talk through some of these things, find some safety activities that we can train people on. Is it a video we do? Is it other resources we have? It doesn't have to necessarily be a police officer in the bar, but that wouldn't hurt my feelings. It doesn't bother me that police officers walk through my bar and want to check our license, that they send in under 21-year-old folks to check my people. Well, if you're not checking their IDs, what are you doing there, right? And it's a safety issue. So really want to be a part of a lot of that, the cure, if you will, for other alcohol issues and concerns in town. The opposite side of that, or the contending side, is we also want to work on, when you do come through, how do we get to a point where I think it's much more manageable if you have a bartending license in the area. Because now we're going to the state, I think it's the state or county, the state coming through with the Tavern League. We just heard about this at our last convention. And now we're going to have competing priorities of, well, do I sign up for the one locally and give my money to my local municipality, or do I sign up for the state? And then they're just kind of, they're covered pretty much wherever they go. Well, I like my money to come back to Wausau, and I really do. I live in Red Mountain, and I've got businesses in Wausau. And so it doesn't hurt my feelings to have our money staying. But I also want to make sure that when our police officers do walk through, if you've got a bartending license in the area, how do we make it so that we don't have issues with that bartender who happens to have one that doesn't say Matt's 101 Pub? Maybe it says the Chatterbox, it's right across the street. But you took all the testing, did all the approvals, and now we can let you bartend for that night without having to be closed down for the evening. Because that obviously puts a damper on our pocket, if you will. So I'd love to be able to participate in some of those discussions of, is there anything we can do as a Tavern League, small business bar owners as well? I know Dan Moss wanted to be here as well with me tonight to be able to discuss both of these, safety and or collaboration with these things. So it's more of a plea of and request to participate, and I'll give my time freely, and I'm available to meet with whoever, whenever, to participate in a lot of this. I know Dan would be willing to help as well. I know Tavern League is very interested in participating.
Well, and you guys have done a great job of collaborating together as neighbor owners.
Yeah.
You know, what I would say is historically, at least the training that we've encouraged tavern owners to take, or at least to engage with through our liquor license review subcommittee, has really been more of an interaction on a one-on-one basis between the owner and the departments, both police and fire.
Yeah.
If there's an opportunity to, you know, make that a more organized thing, you know, I think that's maybe an appropriate discussion that our staff could have with owners, right? And
Yeah, I mean, and listen to what you have to say. Like, you're never gonna hear us say, no, we don't wanna partner with the business community in Wausau. So if you reach out to me, or, you know, figure out who within, it would make sense to partner with the Tavern League, because all the taverns are part of you. I mean, that's your professional organization. And then between myself and the fire chief or the deputy chief, we would assign staff to meet with you and brainstorm what that looks like. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. If I've been around long enough that I feel like the old person now. When I look in here, I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize it. But I would say that we used to provide training with the Tavern League 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And some of it is simply like, it benefits your industry if we're working together to encourage safe rides home. I mean, I don't know if there's still the free cab ride if you go to your bartender,
Yeah,
but
we have a safe ride, and then we also have a designated driver program where even a buddy of yours, if they're not drinking, can get paid to take you home as well.
so like to find ways to market that within the community and your staff and make sure that that's available. Like I think there's a lot of things we can do. The older I get, the more I probably look on the wall and be like, is there an AED on the wall here? And what does that look like? And that might.
Or stop lead.
Right,
yeah.
so,
Pull my belts off like it ended.
I mean, you wouldn't have thought that you'd have to deal with that, but unfortunately, the things that we don't plan for end up happening.
Well,
So
that,
I
even,
think there's a lot of opportunity for that, and you can feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah.
And
Even if you'd file me down to the people that you think might be, you know, at the forefront for that, I'd happily work with them.
perfect. Well, thank you.
perfect, because if you guys can come up with some type of, even a workshop setting or something where you could, you know, instruct a group would be ideal. I mean, we'd love that too, I think, as a committee, we have high expectations, and anything that helps people meet them is a good thing, right? So,
Even as the start of just the acknowledgement, like, yes, reach out to us, so that bar owners and bartenders feel like they can contact and say, you know, like, it's a partnership versus like, oh, you just want police stopping by.
well,
Why not?
there's that,
Right.
yeah.
Why not?
We want that interaction always to be positive, so thank you for bringing that idea. So
Absolutely, thanks, guys.
we'll
I
let you
appreciate it.
guys connect offline and work on that. Thank you so much. Okay, so item number 10 is our community outreach update. So we've got Tracy with us with a report. This is the first month I will highlight that Catholic Charities has supplied their own data. They used to supply data to Tracy. She would build it into her report. Some of the numbers that she gets from them on a routine basis are in her report, but their total service numbers this month are not in the report. So you'll see some skewed results in her report, because now if we get that data from Gary from Catholic Charities, who I think his intention is to provide the data to the clerk and then appear at our meetings in case we have questions for him. You know, if that information isn't in her report, you may see some skew like you see this month. So I'll turn it over to Tracy, but that'll explain why you're seeing something different today than what you've maybe seen in past months. So
Thanks,
welcome.
Lisa. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, really at this point, I'll answer any questions you might have about the report. You know, as Lisa indicated, it's not as complete as months past. I did not receive employment data this month as well. So I just wanted to point out that my efforts this last month, we were able to get 8 individuals housed, which was a banner month, I'll call it. Not only were they housed, but housed with supportive services and ongoing oversight. So fingers crossed that they continue to be successful, but so far so good. And then I think I might have reported this at the tail end of my report last month, but the gentleman who we were able to get housed, who had stage 4 cancer, that's my success story in that he was able to get housed, and not only a week after he was housed, he passed away in his apartment. So,
Oh,
yeah, so sad, but I can lay my head on my pillow at night knowing that he died in a place that he could call home. And so sometimes these wins are not necessarily, we got somebody else and they're thriving, but we got somebody else where they could pass away peacefully in their own space. So that is what I have for my report. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those, but I think the more pressing topic is what Chief Barnes wants to talk
yes,
about.
he wants to
So
talk
I'm gonna
about
turn the
the
floor over to him.
shelter, and I know you guys are both immersed in the work of getting that stood up. So Chief, why don't you go ahead with that update?
Yeah, I mean, one, I just want to be here to answer anybody's questions. There are a ton of moving parts. I just want to give Tracy the props that she deserves because she's been working like incredibly hard to get this taken care of. Finding volunteers and employees in a 3-week period of time and using the city to try and hire them and get it ready to open May 1st, which is a hard open for us, is a challenge. So I summarized most of it in my chief's message, but the cost of us operating this shelter through December 31st is split 50-50 with us and the county. I have published the revised second rendition of the RFP for shelter services. I'm aware of 2 different organizations that have indicated their intention of providing proposals to provide shelter, which their opportunity to do that is because we're filling this gap of 8 months, and it gives them 8 months to plan and prepare and do whatever infrastructure needs are necessary in their facilities to be able to do that. The current challenges for us beyond, well, I'll tell you tomorrow at 2 o'clock, in case anybody's watching this, I know this is live.
No.
Well, it's less helpful.
Tuesday.
But tomorrow at 2 o'clock, we've invited, open invite to all the faith-based organizations, which we see as a primary provider of volunteer services. So if you are aware of or participate in any organization, the hours are really from, we need 9 to 11 individuals from between the hours of 6 at night and 9 at night, 7 days a week. And that group helps get everyone situated and the parts that they need and where they're going to go and their stuff put in bins and them to get changed. But we're also asking organizations that if either to do that and provide a meal for probably upwards of 50 people, or we'll have to find organizations to do both. And that's going well, but we're not to the finish line yet. Just like we've had numerous people apply. I know Captain Nate Seiler and Tracy have been conducting interviews all day today with people that applied for those positions. And then our biggest hurdle right now, which I don't think is insurmountable, is I'm sitting on signing a lease we're having the mayor sign a lease, right? You told me to have the mayor sign a lease.
We just didn't need another council resolution, but he should still sign the lease on behalf of the city as the authorized person on behalf of the city.
Yeah, I don't think it takes a resolution.
Correct, we
Right.
agreed on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the intention is to sign a lease with First United Methodist Church of Wausau. They have 10,000 square feet in their basement. They're renting that to us for probably 30 cents on the dollar for what the going rate would be. In order to use that and play by the rules, we need to go to the Planning Commission and ask for conditional use of that property. That is scheduled for the 29th of this month. And then either on the 30th or the 1st, they have to have a second meeting because that 29th meeting is a public hearing. And then they have to have a meeting to make a decision on after having a public hearing. So that gets us, we just need to have that meeting before 5 o'clock on May 1st so that we're good to go. There are some things that in working through inspections and with the fire department that we have to navigate through and try and afford in order for that basement to be able to ensure that it's a safe environment for people to be in, from smoke detector type, lighting type situations down there.
And we had it outfitted during COVID, right? So it shouldn't need a substantial amount of like renovation or anything.
That's my argument.
Yes, I mean, we know that the shelter was able to operate out of there during COVID.
Right.
So,
Probably call it
I call them on a regular basis and say, well, what if, and I try and negotiate those things. But we won't do that in this meeting. But I think I'd be remiss if I didn't just discuss the different businesses and community members who have really answered the call. And to be honest with you, answered Tracy's call when I'm like, well, I really wish we didn't have to spend money on a washer and dryer. And Tracy said, we'll get that donated. I'm like, sure we will. And we need a refrigerator. She said, we'll get that donated. And both are going to be delivered next week. A washer and dryer by the owners of Greebies, who have donated a brand new washer and dryer, and a refrigerator freezer, which has been donated by Furniture Appliance Mart, as well as people saying, where do I write a check to? So
fantastic.
it's heartwarming to see, which I've always said, whenever we have a major challenge here that we're trying to deal with, this community always steps up, and even though it might look like, how are we going to do this? At the end of the day, we find a way, and it's usually the community that steps up. So, like, full speed ahead. What's it going to look like on May 1st? I don't know, but we're going to have cots and blankets and bedding, and we're going to be able to provide a safe place for people to sleep and rest.
If after the plan commission process between the two meetings and whatnot, if that ends up needing a special council meeting to finalize any of that, let the mayor know, and we can get something pulled together if we have to. I mean, if you need council action before you can move forward, we can work with you.
Well, I mean, I'll just say here that we're opening May 1st, and if the council meeting needs to happen May 3rd, then that's what's going to happen.
Yes, absolutely. No, understood.
And I think a point I've made to the groups that I've spoken to on this is, I said when becoming chief that I had no interest in Wausau becoming like Portland or Seattle, where everywhere you look, there's encampments and garbage and all these negative consequences. But we will not remove encampments if there's not a place for people to be. And so when I get asked, why is the police department doing this? It's because the alternative for this community, the juice is worth the squeeze. And it's a pain in the butt for us, and it's not something that's in our job description to do. But by doing that, it allows us to still police appropriately in this community and do it with our chins up, to be able to know that we're also providing a safe place for them to be. And the Wausau Police Department staff is going to be pushing hard. That our parks are not where you live, and it's not where you camp, and neither are our parking ramps, so that we can protect the investment in downtown and still have the standard of living that we want and quality of life here, while also making sure people are safe.
I sense that people will also, that choose to use the shelter will find that the experience there is a positive one. I really think that it's important that people are treated with respect and with dignity, and, you know, if it happens to be 10 o'clock in the morning and someone's been up all night, needs a place to rest their head, they're not gonna be told they can't go to sleep. You know, and that was one of the things where, you know, just different stories that got exchanged, you know, over the years of, you know, how this experience has gone for people. And, you know, we had an unhoused individual come and talk to us last year, and it was not lost on me that she had found housing, and then after that fact said that she was reluctant to use the prior shelter options. And so, you know, that said, you know, we know what that looks like for people and the right way to do it. And, you know, we're blessed that we have Tracy, who's run one before, that was successful, and that was really, really good when it was running. So thank you for that, both of you, for stepping up and also answering that call. So
the Marathon County, through the county administrator, myself, will put together a group to evaluate any proposals. They're due May 30th, which I think is a Friday at 4 o'clock. They'll be open the week of May 2nd. I don't recall the exact date of the Public Works meeting. But then I think we will come back to, we'll have to have a conversation about what committees to come back to. If those proposals include a commitment that's beyond the dollars that have been provided to myself and with the county, and or it extends beyond 2026, because really we're asking them to provide a proposal for 1 year, but asking them to make a significant investment. So I think there will be some policy decisions that have to be made and robust discussion about that.
Yeah.
But I expect we'll be in a much better place to do that probably come June.
Well, and the fact that we have a day and night interim solution, I think is going to be huge. It's going to be very helpful. So glad to see that. Anybody have questions about the outreach report or about the imminent opening of the shelter? If not, we'll place Tracy's report on file. That's the last item we have on our agenda, so I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion from Watson, is there a second? Second from Larson, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No one's ever opposed. We'll stand adjourned, everybody. Thank you.